Welcome to Real Voices of Happy Valley with Viv and Dave Boardman. Talking to interesting people from up and down Calder Valley. Exciting this week.
Yes, an author. Oh, and you know how I love reading.
You love books, you love authors.
I do, yeah. Bit starstruck.
Yes. But you've met authors before, haven't you?
One or two. I was sitting next to Ruth Rendell once at a party.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know what to say to her because it was full of clever people and I didn't just want to say, oh, I like your books.
When was that?
Oh, years ago, before I had the confidence to speak to her. It's been in the early 90s.
Is that in London?
Yeah.
Ah, one of those. We did go to a couple of parties full of clever people in that London, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
Yes.
But also, one I did feel comfortable approaching was Ian Rankin, author of the Rebus books.
Yes. Didn't you make breakfast for him or something?
Oh, that sounds a bit risque. No, I made him a butty.
Oh, that
and
was
a brew.
right. Yeah.
I was in the green room at Whitby.
No, it wasn't. It was the Beverley Folk Festival.
Folk Festival, yeah. And he was appearing there with a musician.
He was, yes. He was appearing with Michael Weston King. They were doing a tribute to Jackie Levin.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised as well because suddenly I was starstruck. I mean, work at lots of festivals, meet lots of famous musicians and everything, and then I went a bit weak at the knees sitting around a table with Ian Rankin.
Well, you are a big Rebus fan.
Absolutely, yes.
I like Rebus, but you're the super fan out of us, I think.
Yes, and there are a few authors up and down the Calder Valley, but this one is somebody who's had books published that we've both read.
Yeah. Yes.
And I mean, our reading doesn't overlap all that much, does it? Really?
No. Usually yours has at least one murder in and a policeman.
Or a musician. Lots of
rock biographies. Yeah.
Yes. But you tend to read the clever ones, don't you?
Well, I could put it that way. I'm not arguing with that. Yeah. Yeah. I am in a book group. In fact, one of our podcasts was me talking to fellow book grouper Pat Fairclough.
That's true, yes. And this is Stephen May, who I play football with on a regular basis, and you've read two of his books.
I've read one of his books. I have read two, sorry, yeah. And we talk about that in the podcast and which my favourite was.
Yes, and he was quite pleased, wasn't he, that you'd read a couple of his books.
Yeah.
So anyway, here we go. There's our chat with local author Stephen May.
We're high above Eastwood, absolutely beautiful views, talking to Stephen May, novelist from these parts.
There's lots of artists, lots of creative people, lots of novelists in the Calder Valley, and you're one of them. And seemingly increasingly successful, is that fair?
No, I think with artists, any kind of artist, you don't really have a career. It's not like you go in as junior novelist and then work your way up to chief executive novelist and then retire. It's more like you have a constellation of projects, some of which sparkle brightly and some of which hardly twinkle at all. And it's and you never know as a writer or any kind of artist what ones are going to really take off and what ones are going to be destined to oblivion. So I have had some books that I've done a couple of books that have twinkled brightly. The last one, Sellers the Rope, was probably one of those, though it's all relative. And then I had an early book that did well, and in between I had books that were just as good that no one noticed or didn't take much notice of. So it goes very. It's hard to tell. And also the other thing, you set off writing a book and you've got it all planned. It's going to be this kind of book, and I'm going to write it in this kind of a way. And then something happens in the writing of it. I mean, they take quite a long time, and from your plan sort of doesn't really survive contact with with the labour of doing it, I suppose.
So that was one of the things I was going to ask. Are you suddenly inspired to write about something? Does something stir something up? Or do you think, like, this is my job, I just have to wait till I can write something?
I think I used to... people would say things, or I would overhear things, or people would tell me some kind of story, and then I would build on that. And I used to write mainly because I would sort of wander about the world going, that's insane? Or, just, I think the job of a novelist really is to look harder at things than most people do. And to worry about things more than most people do. And so I used to do that about the contemporary world. And then it struck me as I was getting older, I mean, my first book came out in 2008, was that I had less and less to say, or less and less to say that was relevant. The modern world was drifting away from me, like I'd gone on some kind of spacewalk, and I was in deep frozen space. So then I sort of retreated to the past. I discovered that my last book, Sell Us the Rope, I discovered that Stalin had spent 3 weeks in England in 1907 for this conference, this Communist Party conference. And no one else had really written about it. It was a couple of paragraphs in biographies of Stalin. So that, I thought, well, that's a great thing to be doing. And now I've found retreating to the past as a way of saying what I want to say about things, but with a bit more distant, and with, and enable me just to find out stuff that was interesting to me as well. So I seem to be now firmly, for a while anyway, in the business of historical novels.
Well, that's good. I was just stick with Sell Us the Rope for a moment, because I read that and I really loved it. It partly helped because I was like an old loony, still am, an old loony lefty, and I was aware that Lenin and various other people have spent time in London, but I didn't know the story about Stalin being there. But as I was reading through it, you've got Stalin, you've got Rosa Luxemburg and one or two other real people, and then there's people you've invented.
Yeah, mostly I've invented them. I mean, though, even some of the minor characters turn out to be real. There's a character called Arthur Bacon whose dad was the landlord of Stalin's lodgings, and he was a real person. He was a kid when Stalin stayed there, and he struck up some kind of friendship with Stalin, which he then told to the Evening News in an interview when Stalin died. So even some of the main woman in the book, Ellie Vuko, I made her up mostly, but she's based on people who were there. She's like an amalgamation of all the fiery left-wing women that did attend the conference. They were like famously much more radical and anarchic than the men. They were the most rousing speeches came from them, and the press at the time were fascinated by them. And also there had been an Ellie Vuko who'd fought in the Russian Civil War and died in that war, and there was whole regiments of women soldiers, and I wanted to find a way of sort of celebrating the voices of those all those different women, but also remembering the people like Ellie Vuko who died in that war. So I suppose even so, yes, there's some real people, and I've made up what they did and said, and taken some liberties with I tried to stick to their characters. And then there are people that I've invented, but I tried to stick to make them plausible that they could have been there, if you like.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing read as quite plausible.
Oh yeah, that's
to me, which I suppose is what you wanted. But, sticking with the sort of inventing characters, I mean, I think the rest of your previous novels are made up stories and made up characters, but. Is it similar? Are they based on an amalgam of real people you've met?
Sometimes I'm taking petty revenge on people who've annoyed me. I should.
Good for you.
I should have said things to them at the time, but didn't. Couldn't think of anything clever enough to say. So, and sometimes, I mean, the book before Sell Us the Rope, We Don't Die of Love. There were lots in Hebden Bridge. There were lots of long-term marriages. Splitting up, and I went through a phase of being told, the circumstances of people splitting up, and And some of these stories were amazing, and so again I sort of boiled some of them down, and then let the events kind of unfold in my imagination rather than how they unfolded. But there was a moment when I was doing a reading in Hebden, and I was reading about the end of a relationship and realised that the people were in the room.
Oh,
Oh dear.
But I don't think that, people don't often recognise themselves in books, and they always think they're the heroes. But yeah. So I suppose it's basically I am a thief. Anything that anyone does say to me, there's at least a chance it will end up in the book. So
I think you should be more of a magpie.
Yes.
Describe yourself as that. Pick up little bits.
Yeah, so all the shiny things. Yeah.
And then
So
look through them later.
Yeah. So So it's always a mix of the real and the, and then hopefully the source material and what you've made up sort of blend enough to create something, that is your own.
So how do you work? Do you work to a timetable each day?
I like to work in the morning. I'm not very good at working late, and I like to do about 2 hours. But if I do much more than 2 hours, I can edit for longer than 2 hours, but I can't actually write for longer than 2 hours, and I'm quite easily distracted. So I have to sort of force myself to do it. But if it goes on much past lunchtime, I'm probably, and of course I've got a full-time job, which I'm so I have to. I have to allow time for that, tragically.
Shame. But
It's a terrible shame.
Yes, I was going to ask, I wonder, I suspect it's the majority of published novelists have to have another job as well.
Yeah, nearly everyone. I mean, it is, I think the average for a full-time writer is about £12,000 a year, but I suspect that it's not even that much, because a lot of those novelists are actually doing some teaching, and it's skewed by a very few people who earn a phenomenal amount of money.
Yeah.
So they
they would have.
So if you were to take those people out, the average would be even less. Yeah. No, it's if I had to live on the earnings of my books, obviously writers never talk about money really, because it's too painful. But but if I had to live on the money, I could have one quite lucrative month, and then I would starve the rest of the year. So I suppose it's about 1/12 of my income in a good year comes from the books.
My favourite book of yours, I suppose it's a kind of be careful what you wish for theme, is the Wake Up Happy Every Day.
Oh really?
And I don't think it's too much of a spoiler, because it happens very near the beginning. Yeah. But it's somebody who's quite hard up and has maybe made a bit of a mess of his life, stays with his friend from school who is a reclusive billionaire. Yeah. And then the friend drops dead, and
he takes
our hero can take his life over. And it's a fantastic kind of fantasy, but you take it so that you see what that would really be like.
Yeah, I could have done better with that book, actually. I think,
do you think so?
I think I would keep that. I mean, it goes in lots of different characters, lots of different stories, lots of different voices, and I wish I'd stuck absolutely with those, with that guy,
yeah, because that's who sticks out to me.
So
to me, it's about him, and be careful what you wish for.
Maybe I'll find a way to do it again. Have somebody win the lottery or something.
Yeah, you could always have the same theme, but a different way of getting there.
Not so many assassins.
Yeah.
So, what's the process? To say quickly, how do you go from being someone who wants to write a novel to being someone who has written a novel, to being someone who's actually managed to get that novel published?
Well, so I wasn't very good at many things at school, but I read a lot, and because reading a lot and then starting to write. So I did a lot at school, and then like lots of people discovered. Well, for a start, I went to university and did English literature, which is a terrible, terrible thing to do if you want to write books, because you're there with all the great weight of literature pressing on you, and why should you think that you can add to that pile of it? And of course, in your early 20s, you don't have much to say, or most people don't. Also, I went to university at a time when they weren't encouraging creative writing. It was all very much like, well, new books. Why would you want to do that when you've got this book? You've got Shakespeare here, and you've got Kafka here, and why would you? Anyway, so and then, discovered drink and girls and all of the usual things. And so I was very sort of distracted for a while. And then I had children young, and, that's a distraction as well. So for lots of reasons, and then the years sort of slipped by. And I think it was only when I started to meet some people who published books, my contemporaries, and I thought, so there are two things that are very inspiring. One is when you meet people who are brilliant and are doing well, and you're really inspired by the work. And the other inspiration is when you meet people who you don't think are that good, but are somehow making a living. And you think, well, they can do that. I could do that as well. So, and then what? I think, and then there was a catalyst moment. I mean, John Irving said, if you're a writer who doesn't write, you'll always be a bit depressed, and you won't know why. And I think for a long time I was a bit depressed. So I wasn't really writing anything, but I'd become a teacher through a series of terrible accidents, and then was a drama teacher, and I took a group of kids to a creative writing retreat. It hadn't been organised by me, it had been organised by the English teacher. And they were sort of, it was the Arvin Foundation, but it wasn't here, it was in Devon, and the kids all got on, and they were all writing, they were working with the professional writers, and I was just there to sort of, to stop people getting pregnant, or just to supervise, and then I did some writing as well. I just joined in with the kids, and I got back, and I felt, hugely encouraged by it. I felt a sort of creativity waking up again after a long sleep, and so I was living in Ipswich at the time, so I joined a creative writing group. Based in the theatre, so I was a drama teacher, wrote a couple of plays. They were put on in very fringy ways. At least one of them was terrible. But, it went on, and I sort of got a bit of a... And then I thought, well, if you're writing plays, you've got to work with directors and actors, and all of that kind of collaborating stuff can be difficult. And then somebody has to go and raise money to put it on the show, and you put the show on, and then you have to see people not coming to your theatre production. I don't have to see people not reading my books, but if you're at a play, you very much see people not coming, and also sometimes leaving at half time or whatever. And
that's very much the glass is half empty.
Yeah, and then you feel the sort of restlessness in the room. So anyway, I thought I'd write a novel, and at that time I didn't know anything about agents or publishers or anything like that. I just thought I'd write a book because I could control the whole world. But the other big thing that had happened, I'd gone to an Arvin Foundation course taking these kids, and then the Arvin Foundation at Lumbank in Heptonstall had a vacancy, and Karen, at the time they employed couples, and Karen and I applied, and we got that job. And the thing about working for the Arvin Foundation is that you see people writing all the time. It's not just the professional writers are coming, but everybody's coming. 16 every week. People are coming and writing. And so if you're not writing then, and you're interested in writing, you get a bit panicky. So then I started writing really seriously, and and it gradually, and I wrote a book that I got an agent. And the way I did that, there's no secret to it. I just, at that time, there wasn't any email really. Well, there was, but you didn't. Still printed my book out, sent it, put it in an envelope, sent it off. Got an agent very quickly. There's no years of struggle there. But that agent couldn't sell the book, so I did have, the heartbreaking rejection, and it was rejected in the worst kinds of ways. And the worst kind of way is not this book is terrible. That's an okay rejection, really. The worst rejection is this book is great. I love it. Can't publish it, but I love it, because then you think, if the people who love it won't publish it, what will you do then? So I had quite a lot of those, but then it did come out with a small publisher. The next book came out with a bit of a bigger publisher. Then there was Wake Up Happy Every Day, yeah. And it all seemed to be going quite well. And then my editor left Bloomsbury, which is who I was published by then. Suddenly there were new people, and it was a little bit like, I guess it was a little bit like being a footballer. You suddenly realise that the new manager you don't fit in his shape. He wants his own team, and I was very much in the reserve squad, and I was still publishing books, but I published them with a small. I was rescued by a publisher, a small publisher based in Scotland, Sandstone Press. So it was like that footballer who suddenly gets a new lease of life in the Scottish Premier League rather than the English Premier League. But really, I'm very aware that I'm lucky to be able to be allowed to write the kind of they're old books. The ones I write, they don't fit any set genre. I'm writing historical books, but it doesn't really fit any genre, and that's sort of dangerous. I'm also, a middle-aged white bloke. I'm not very sexy. I'm not Zadie Smith in any kind of a way. It has to be said. So I feel kind of lucky to be able to write the books that I write, and they still have a fighting chance of getting in the shops. So I'm quite, yeah. So that's glass half full.
I can see that makes a difference if the books are all quite different from each other.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get that kind of fan base. I'm waiting for the next Stephen May to come out.
Yeah.
I took to reading a series of books by Simon McLeave. It's based in Wales. The murder mystery, whodunit things. You'd be amazed to discover how many people get murdered in Snowdonia. Then I discovered that he used to write for Midsummer Murders, so it all made sense. But whether it's literature or not is immaterial. I love them, and I've already pre-ordered the next one. Yeah, because I've got a very good idea what it's going to be like.
I think that's important, and I think it's important keeping you going. So it would be naive, foolish, reckless, and wrong to think that there's a huge Stephen May fan base out there. But there probably are half a dozen people who are thinking, oh great, Steve's got a new book out, and that's actually enough. This is enough to think there are some people out there who sort of get it or are interested in it, or even if they think, oh, I didn't like this one quite so much. So it is, and then in some ways writing books is, you're writing it to express yourself, you're writing it because you've got things to wrestle out, you're writing it to cure some terrible neurosis within yourself, but you're also spending a couple of years filling out a lottery ticket, so that is, so there is that element to it as well. So.
I liked your metaphors of football there, because that's how Dave knows you through football. I thought you might explore that a bit, Dave.
Yes.
Well, I'm very much better novelist than I am a footballer. I think that's fair to say. As a footballer, I make a great novelist.
I wouldn't possibly know. But I know Dave enjoys
I agree with Steve
football.
from that.
Well, it's fair enough. I'll be there. Yeah.
Yes. No, we play football on Tuesdays.
Yeah. It's the highlight of my week, I have to say.
It is. It's great fun. I've said often, it's like proper football in slow motion.
Yeah. It's very soft in some cases.
Yeah, but to be sort of over 50 as we are and still playing football is generally just good fun. I think it's, and it is. Obviously it's a laugh, but I like the way that for that hour, it's still a laugh, but it's also really serious for that hour. And then it's not again.
And it's a team thing, obviously,
absolutely.
compared to writing, which must be quite solitary.
Yeah, no, it's so much better in every respect.
Yes. And you do thoroughly enjoy your celebrations when you do get a goal.
When I do get a goal, I have those moments I have to sort of, oh right, yes, okay, I've gone into a little bubble, but luckily it doesn't happen very often.
Yes, but it's jolly good fun being in the pub afterwards.
Yes.
And often say it's a metaphor for life.
Yeah, no, it is.
Football, it certainly is. There were other questions we were going to ask.
One of mine was, where you were saying you lived in Ipswich before. Is that where you're from?
No, I'm from Bedford, which is a town that no one's even very sure where it is. Is it in East Anglia? Is it in the Midlands? So I grew up in Bedford, which is but my father's Scottish. My mother came from Suffolk. I went to Essex University and then moved to Ipswich. So it's like until I moved up here, which is 20 years ago this year, I hadn't ever lived outside the Anglia TV region. So I'd only moved around in that little bit.
And what brought you?
Well, I came to work for the Arvin Foundation here at Hepton Stores.
So that was
so that was when I moved up north there.
Contact.
And I'm still, obviously. I'll never be northern, but still kind of. It's eye-popping in some ways because where I came from was very flat. It's very hilly, and there was a sort of difference in. And I think that the weather changes people. The history of the area changes people. It's very different from where I'd come from, even though, and I think it is one of those places where nearly everyone comes from somewhere else, which makes it quite interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting place to be.
But you're happy you made that move?
Definitely, yeah. No, we were definitely ready to move. There was absolutely no question that we were looking for an adventure, but I think we were looking for a sort of a responsible adventure in that we had kids. So we got 3 kids between us. So we had to, you can't just rip everything up. You can't just tear everything down. You rip everything up, tear it down. You can't. You have to make sure that you've got some sort of income there.
Yeah, yeah. And your kids are presumably pretty much grown up here, I think.
Yeah, well, my oldest daughter, our oldest child, I only got one daughter, she was living in Colchester, and she was just going into the sixth form when we moved up here. So she stayed with her mum. But what had happened when I lived in Ipswich, she used to come every other weekend, and here she didn't come every other weekend. But when she did come, she stayed for longer.
Yeah.
And she's living in London now. So, so that was a really good break for her, I think. And and the other kids went to Calder High. And,
yeah. I think there's something nice living in. I mean, our children had left school by the time we came here, but I think there's something nice about everyone in town going to the same school.
I think so. I also think it was interesting about Hebden, because it's a small town. It's quite multi-generational in some ways. Everybody goes to the trades club. Everybody goes. There's not that kind of artificial split between. I mean, obviously there is some generational split, but you're going to bump into people. Herbie can't hide from us. Particularly. Well, there's not like a place where all the kids go that we'd never go. Everybody's all mixed up and that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
But it does strike me, though, since we've been here, and most of the people I've met have either been to Calder High School or have kids who've been to Calder High School, or both.
Yeah.
And so everyone has that a link, sort of a core link. And a lot of people do seem to get on, the generations generally.
Generally. I mean,
do seem to get on better than if we were sort of in cities and
I do
the
think
kids go to one place and the parents go to another place entirely.
It's a proper comprehensive in that way, isn't it? Calder High. It's meant to. It's almost the comprehensive ideal. Everybody going to the same place, whatever class, whatever background. The thing that makes it is the presence of the grammar schools, which I very much resent, because they turn, where you've got grammar schools, you turn every other school into a kind of secondary modern, don't you? And so by creaming off that 10% or whatever, and it's no shade on people who do send their kids there, but I think it does it has a negative effect on the state schools, whether that's Todd High or Todd High.
Well, it does. I mean, I went to a secondary modern school and was told quite, not just verbally, but by the whole structure of the school, you're going nowhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, I went to a grammar school.
Don't waste your time having ambitions, boy.
I went to a girls' grammar school, and even in my grammar school, very few who went to university, because girls just didn't really. Teaching, which you didn't have to go to university for, and secretarial stuff.
My mum went to a girls' grammar, and it was teaching or nursing. It seems to be a lot of her contemporaries are. And my mum was a teacher, her sister was a nurse. But her brother, who my mum always says was the cleverest in the family, failed his 11 plus, and so he was a carpet fitter. There really was that sort of extreme, that sort of very hugely unfair.
Yes, I had a careers interview which lasted a few minutes. What do you want to do? I want to be an architect. Well, you can't.
And so people carry that wound around as well. Actually, I think the things you weren't allowed to do. Well, not even that you weren't allowed to do them. You weren't even allowed to dream about doing them. Fantasize about doing them. Imagine doing them.
Right. Anyway, I think we've finished our cup of tea.
So we'll leave all we can from this, man.
So that was great. Thanks for that,
No,
Stephen.
Absolute pleasure.
That was really interesting.
I didn't witter on too much.
Well, we'll cut bits out of it. Usually us.
To be honest, the point of our podcast is to listen to people wittering on. It's about giving people a voice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Real Voices of Happy Valley with the amazing author Stephen May. If you liked it, then say so on Facebook, click like, and share it with your friends. Follow links and let them know about us.
And follow us on your podcast platform.
Yes.
It's what you were supposed to say.
Yeah. Oh, you know me and tech.